Welcome to the New Discovery Christian Podcast, where you'll find Bible messaging and sermons that will encourage, uplift, and challenge you to a godlier life. Join our community and become inspired to continue living a God-directed life.
Welcome again to the New Discovery Podcast. I'm here as your host, Kyle. I've got my co-host, Zach, in his infamous return. He is back with us for another 2 podcasts today.
I've been out with injury, and now I'm back.
Out with an injury.
Out with an injury.
Out with a second job going on. So, been doing a little long crew lately, so he's taking a rest from the sun, I guess.
Yep.
And he's in here with us, getting a little rest, cooling down in his stringer shirt. So we got him, and then we got a new co-host as well. We got Parker today, and a few things about Parker is I've met him at a camp called Sunshine Camp for youth when it comes to middle school and high school, and he's worked there for quite a while, and I've known him through that and being able to lead teenagers and lead in the Christian faith. And has also worked in youth ministry as well in his own church and up to this point as well. So he's going to bring in a perspective that's, similar to mine as well, bringing in kind of a youth minister, having the background of, some knowledge in that area, teaching in that area, having the maturity in that area to be in that position. I don't think anyone in his church would have put him in that position if, he was crazy and wild and partying and smoking up the drugs and alcohol.
What they don't know, they don't know.
Well, yeah,
First words from Parker.
But with that transition there, kind of threw that on you a little bit for a transition. Yeah. But we're going to be talking about today about partying from, we're all 3 Christian guys, and what's our experiences with that, and what does the scriptures have to tell us, and principles. Is it clear? Is it not clear? So that's what we're going to try to jump in today, and we're going to keep going with it as long as we can and see where it goes. So I think it's going to be an interesting conversation because I've never had, I think, a specific conversation about this that I can really think of versus maybe a couple people just saying it's just wrong and then that was it. So with no further discussion.
Partying's a very vague term.
Yeah, so throwing that out there, I mean, what do you guys think about just the word partying? I mean, what do you guys think of initially?
Well, first, I just want to say real quick, I appreciate New Discovery for letting me come on. These podcasts have been helpful in my life, so it's really cool to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Glad to have you.
But when I think of partying, the first thing that pops in my mind is like I mentioned earlier, like somebody doing a line of Coke on the table. It's obviously those are bad.
You're not thinking of Coca-Cola, right? I'm guessing.
Well, it's
just for anyone else out there.
Yeah.
You're snorting Coca-Cola. I don't know about that.
That sounds pretty bad.
Well, they both
too.
use a straw, so.
I guess they do, don't they?
But then, of course, you have on the flip side, you have just regular, like a birthday party or just get-togethers like we did in college. So, I don't think parties are necessarily bad, but they do have this reputation, I think, to go south.
Yeah, a stigma. I mean, what about you, Zach? I mean, Parker's gone to Oxford too, and I know you've gone to Oxford. I don't know if that was the same experience necessarily, but if there's anything you need to speak to that.
So I'm going to speak on some stories. I guess I can. Prior to me being baptized when I was 21, but then I did also drift away, and I do have stories after that as well. But my definition of partying I don't think is a bad thing. And I'm a little more loose with, I'm okay if you drink a couple beers, but there's a point you have to know, and it's a dangerous thing to teeter around on that point of drunkenness and drinking too much. So, 1 or 2 beers, everyone's usually safe with that unless you're, really small or your tolerance is really down. So I don't have a problem doing that. It's just when it gets out of control, you start losing your mind, I always like to say losing your wits. I like to have my wits about me. And when you cross that line of drinking too much, or if you're doing cocaine, there is no line there. I don't. No pun intended there.
Yeah,
there is one.
There's a line, all right.
But I'm pretty sure I've never done cocaine in my in my party days, but I'm pretty sure I've seen it before, and and as soon as you do it, I'm pretty sure you're out your wits. So
I'm pretty sure you're gone.
so if you're out, you have a couple beers, you're playing some cornhole at your parents' house, hanging out for 4th of July, shooting some fireworks. I don't think there's a problem with that.
Yeah.
What do y'all think?
Well,
I think that's a good question. It's kind of I'm glad what taking off of you, but kind of hinging off of what Parker said earlier is I didn't even think about the birthday party thing at all.
Yeah.
Right there. Actually, I didn't even consider that. I mean, it's even in the word as well, birthday party, and I think that's the thing too. Is I'm trying to think maybe we should start with the good or the bad right now. You started with the bad a little bit, so maybe
Go to the good.
you think we should start with the good first?
Well, I mean, you're leading this sucker, so
Well, let's start with the bad and
right.
end with the good. How
Let's
about
do-
that?
yeah,
We'll
that
end on
sounds
a good
good.
note.
Yeah, there you go.
Because sometimes when this is discussed, sometimes it's like all bad.
Yeah.
And maybe ending on a good note is maybe that'll open it up for some people.
Yeah.
So I guess taking off what you're saying, maybe we'll hinge off the coat. We'll come back to the birthday party part.
and I'm gonna play devil's advocate on one part of this. I'm gonna bring it up.
I
Okay.
love devil's advocate.
Okay.
That's cool with me.
All
So maybe let me say this. When I think of a party, I guess when I first thought of a party, especially middle school or high school, I always just like assumed there was alcohol and drugs always involved. So I guess I should say that. And before my pre-Christian days, there was a couple times that I ended up going to a few parties that involved drugs and alcohol and things like that. Now, the difference is, I have to admit, even though I wasn't a Christian, now, everyone's tempted in things and people live in sin before they're a Christian in certain ways, but I went to these parties, but my mom, if I'm honest, trained me up really well not to get involved in those things. I mean, did a stellar job, a balance between, I got to give her credit, of telling me that the dangers of something, the dangers of the drugs and the alcohol, and even sex is involved in partying as well. I mean, if we're going to be honest here, that happens too. Once you start drinking, then all your
barriers.
all your barriers and everything that holds you back, then it's kind of like whatever. So, she would bring those topics up to me, and she said things along the lines of, in the end, I can't control you. I can't force you not to do these things. I mean, you can end up sneaking out, and I'll never know. But what I'm telling you is, if you go and do these things, more than likely you're going to end up regretting. You're going to regret doing these things. And why are you doing them? Are you just doing them to impress people? You need to ask yourself these questions. Is that okay with you to just do things because other people just say to do them? Are you okay with being that type of person in your life? So you need to ask yourself that question. And also, if you get a bunch of drugs and alcohol in your system and you end up sleeping with a girl, it's like, what if you end up, getting her pregnant or something? Or it may not just be that. Maybe you don't get her pregnant. What if she just accuses you of doing it and you can't remember and they just take her word for it? And then now there you are, 15, 16, and now you're accused of raping a girl. That's on your head. And where's your life going to go from there? Yeah. So she says that, bring a little of that fear of the Lord in there. And on the other side of things, she tried to be balanced with saying, but I'm not going to sit there and tell you not to go to anything with other teenagers involved with it, because I'm not going to try to, I'm not going to say that all of that is bad and that you shouldn't go anywhere with other teenagers and stuff like that. She's just saying, I want you to use your own head. You need to know who you are. You need to know what the repercussions are. She says, now, if I know that stuff's not going to be there, I'm not going to send you there. But in the end, there's going to be moments where you could probably end up going to some of this stuff without me knowing, and then that's up to you then, and you need to hear this. So that was really helpful, I think, for me.
Right, and I think to kind of go off what you said, I think there's an important tension that needs to be held, because, right, as Christians, from a Christian perspective, we're in the world, but we're not partakers of the world.
Yeah.
And I think what Paul says in 1 Corinthians is very helpful to this subject. When he talks about, one, about not being mastered by anything, even though he's, free in Christ, he has this Christian liberty, he makes an effort not to be mastered by anything. And he also makes the effort not to cause his brother or sister in Christ to stumble. So we have that on one hand, but on the other hand, he talks about, even while being under the law of Christ, go into those without the law and becoming all things to all men so that I might win some.
Yeah.
And I think kind of the conflict I have is, where is that line between leading another person astray while at the same time building those relationships? Because I think sometimes you can't avoid a sinful situation. And like you said, if you know it's going to be there prior to going, then that's a little bit different. But what if you don't know it's going to be there? You show up and then it's there.
You got to be prepared at all times, really.
Right.
Prepared at all times. And if you're confident in yourself, like you said, if you're confident in yourself, like whenever I was baptized and I put my faith in Jesus, there came my confidence. I used to be super shy, afraid to talk to people, confidence talking to women, talking to strangers, going, even it's helped me with sales. Like if I didn't have that faith, I still think I might be that same person, shy and not confident in my own skin. So like Parker's saying, if you show up somewhere and you don't expect to be in this situation, if you're confident in yourself, you've been prepared for these situations, then you should have no problem resisting the temptation, still hanging out with your friends, and possibly setting a good example, having a chance to witness to some people as well. I've tried witnessing to people while drinking before and while they're drinking before, and that usually doesn't go very well. So you have to be sort of tactical, I guess, in how you do it. And I mean, if someone's drunk, it's going to be tough to witness to them because they're probably not going to either remember or they're going to have their own ideas swirling through their head.
Yeah.
Hinging off what you said real quick is the one thing I thought about is there's wisdom involved in this decision here because there have been times where I have also been around people who they're drinking, for instance. And I still have lines on making decisions on when I will be involved in a situation where people are drinking. Now, people are snorting up crack and stuff like that. I'm just gonna say, as a Christian, my reputation, it's already, if that was even seen, it's like almost over. I mean, so
that's another level.
Yeah,
man.
that's another level. Yeah. So now people are out and they're drinking, and say I'm not, for instance. I'm not going to say I'm not going to drink with these people. But there's a line, though. There's a line. If it starts turning into every time we meet and we get drunk and then I'm seen with them and someone else sees it, I could be assumed that I'm drinking as well. And what if that person is tempted, like you were saying, Parker? I was going to bring this up about Paul, and you need to be cognizant of other people. And if they're tempted into drinking and they see you, especially if they know you're a Christian, especially if they know you're mature. I'm not saying if you're not, you should just do whatever, but even more pressure is on you. Then that may be the green light for them of, I've had issues, because here's what they could say to themselves. I've had issues with drinking and I just don't drink. Well, look at Kyle. He could just be around them and he can do that. And so now they have drinking issues. Now they go to the bar with their friends and one thing leads to another. We know if you have some type of issue in that area, you're a drunk and you end up going to the bar, you go to the liquor store, it's all over with. So you kind of almost gave a green light, like you were saying earlier, for them to go do that. And in some ways, that sin is now on me.
Right.
Because I didn't stand up for them in a certain way. So now that doesn't mean
is that a stumbling block? Is that what Paul's meaning when he talks about the causing, like you said, causing someone to stumble?
Yeah.
I would think so.
That's how I would.
That's
how I understand it.
Yeah, that's the way I see it, and it's just you got to be. So that doesn't mean you just can't be around people drinking, but if it becomes a drunkenness thing, again, the wisdom has to be in here because I'm not just going to tell people I know that I'm never going to be around you when you drink. Yeah. I'm not going to do that because there's assumptions with Jesus, for instance, where he says he's eating with drunkards. Sometimes there's an assumption here that some people may be drinking while Jesus is around, and some people assume that he could be almost a drunkard as well. So he is more than likely around people that are drinking, and so that I think is a tactic with the Pharisees to knock him down. So
to strip his character in the eyes of the people.
So there's a fine line here, because he's spending time with these people, and I'm not saying, again, don't. But there's a wisdom involved if they're doing these things, and it's a drunkenness thing. I don't think Jesus spent time with people that were drunk and they were getting drunk. Now, is there people that were drinking? There seems to be a little assumption that there are some people that are drinking and they took it that way. Yeah. So, again, it's a wisdom thing.
Yeah, and I think each situation is gonna be, independent of the next. Like there's no one size fits all.
The devil's in the details.
And this is where I'm glad you brought up wisdom, right? This is where that idea of wisdom, or to live the skill of living a moral life,
yeah,
is so important. And of course, wisdom comes from the mouth of God. And I'm glad you brought up the fear of the Lord. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord, right? So, but yeah, and I will say this: I have had prayers go unanswered. The one prayer I've never been denied is a prayer for wisdom, as he talks about in James. So
James is one of my favorite books.
Yeah,
I like
just very practical.
Yeah,
a lot of good stuff diving in that. I do want. All right, now I was talking about devil's advocate earlier. So I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but I want to spit it off y'all. So what happens when you say that about drinking? But then you said, but then someone comes back when Jesus turned water into wine as his first miracle at a I think it was a wedding, maybe celebration.
Yes, I believe it was a wedding.
A wedding celebration.
Yeah.
What would y'all say to somebody who would say that to y'all?
That's a good question, and I think that's the thing too, is that drinking, nowhere in Scripture does it ever say that drinking is wrong. Let's throw that on the table. If I'm wrong, put in the comments. Maybe there's something I've overlooked, but I've never seen anything that just said drinking is actually in itself wrong. Like alcohol drinking is wrong.
Always drunk. It always says drunkenness, I believe.
Drunkenness, and then Paul says you need to be sober of mind.
Yeah.
So that assumes drugs, as soon as you do it, you're immediately not sober of mind. So that enters in that category.
That's what Chad used to always tell me. Like with weed, you're instantly you're not sober of mind.
Right.
Now, alcohol, you can have 2 beers and still be good.
Right.
Technically. I mean, it's just a tough line. Sorry, but continue.
No, it's good. And Paul ends up saying, even to Timothy, add a little wine to your water to help your stomach. Now, in context of that, people need to hear this is back then, the water systems were very polluted back then. This is the context. There's a lot of bacteria. You got a dead animal upstream that was coming into your river, and you're drinking that. Whoa. There could be a dead body, a whole army, their blood intermingled with the river, or let's be honest, someone's taking a pee or a dump upstream. I'm just being honest here, It's like, that's where they go, and it's like, yum, it's like, so you want to put some wine or something in there to help kill the bacteria.
Yeah.
So, and back then, in context, their wine was also very watered down, to be honest. They did not have a pungent wine and alcohol like we do today. It was very watered down. I mean, you'd have to drink close to probably like a gallon or something like that probably to get close to getting drunk. So that needs to be said as well here. It's not as pungent as it is today, and they had some actual uses for it. And
it was a medicine, and wine in itself has a lot of good vitamins, a lot of good things about it for your body. But it's like my dad always said, like everything in moderation. Well, and I mean, it's a good phrase, but I don't think you should do everything in moderation. Like you don't want to.
Well, you could do drugs.
You don't want to do heroin in moderation.
Yeah, I was.
What I mean?
About to say, yeah.
But I know what he means.
It's a good principle, though.
Yeah,
it's a good principle.
So
yeah,
that's where I would go with that.
Yeah, that's what I would say is, I think. Now, that's not the whole meaning behind it. That can be taken as a principle from that.
Yeah.
Is also that, I'm just going to be honest, is they use that in things like celebrations and parties. It's got to be said. Even the cup to even hinge off of that, the cup that we talk about, the cup of Christ, is a cup full of wine in the Last Supper. So we don't know for sure if Jesus drank of the cup. I need to say that also out loud. But there can be an assumption that he did drink from the cup because they're at the table and he's given it, and it seems to be his cup
he would partake
that he's
in
giving.
Yeah.
And did he not? Now it does not clearly say he sipped from it. I need to be careful here, but there can be an assumption he did. Now, did Jesus ever get drunk at one point? That's an absolutely no. So that needs to be said. It's never an assumption that the disciples ever did as well. It seems to be. If Paul is asking Timothy to also drink water with a little wine, more than likely Jesus did for the same reason. He's fully human and fully God. More than likely, he wouldn't have been like, "Well, I'm not going to drink the water without any wine when everyone else does because of the bacterial issues in the water. It's very possible and likely that he did.
I mean, he probably enjoyed the taste of wine. Like his human form probably enjoyed sipping a little wine with his steak or with his bread, dipping his bread in the wine. I mean, probably tasted good,
Yeah, so I mean, that's on the table as well. Now, how far that goes, again, I can't clearly say it because it never clearly ever says that Jesus did, and maybe he didn't because I know also that there's the. Let me make sure I say this right. The it's not the I think it's the Galilean. There's an oath that you take in the Old Testament. I can't remember the name of it, but you never sip of any alcohol and you never cut your hair. And some people assume that Jesus may have done so. Samson did, in context. I'm trying to remember the oath. It may have been the Galilean oath.
It's like Nazarene.
The Nazarene.
Something. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
It's the Nazarene oath, yeah. And so you never touch alcohol and you never cut your hair. So Jesus is also from the area of Nazareth. So some people may say that he never had. And that's also very likely that, now it never clearly says he did, but he could have, certainly. So in that case, he may not have touched alcohol, which is another context of it's okay to not drink alcohol as well. And that's also on the table as well. We don't know for sure if Jesus did, but Jesus never ever spoke against it either. Right. So I think it's never clear because it wants us to have these discussions. Yeah. It wants us to talk about it.
And to go back to the argument you made, about Jesus turning water to wine. Mm-hmm. Well, he also multiplied the bread and fish to feed 5,000. Mm-hmm. So, but is that an endorsement of gluttony? Well, of course not. It's, we're morally responsible for what we do with the gifts God gives us. Yeah. Right? So when we abuse it, it's not on God, it's on us.
That's a good point. That's a real good point because then I always think about this wedding ceremony like there's like 20 people there, and I'm wondering why Jesus made a big barrel full of wine. But there could have been 500 people there. We don't know how many people were there because it just seemed like if there's 20 people there, why would he do a big barrel? Because that would seem like either a waste or they're fixing to drink a lot of it.
This was a whole community that went down.
Yeah.
So
that. So I didn't really think about that. Like, yeah, he wouldn't. He probably just made enough so everybody can enjoy a little bit of it.
Right. So
you would think.
I think that's implied. No. I think.
But there's no way either side wouldn't be able to prove. Like, you wouldn't be able to prove it either way. But you could just.
Yeah.
You could assume. Because back then, they did usually have, if there was a wedding in a community, it would be almost the whole community there, right?
Right.
Is that the culture back then?
Yeah, it was like a whole event that went down for everyone to be involved in. Because they didn't eat a lot of meat back then, so like when you slaughtered the lamb, you slaughtered the calf.
Yeah.
Like, you read
it was
scripture.
A celebration.
It's like, man, I haven't eaten meat in a long time. It's like now, you're gonna have all of that. You're gonna get the wine out, and it's gonna be a celebration together. So, I think that's another part of this that's to be known as well, is that they had these as community events, and that there was another focus of why they're doing this back then is when they're around the table, when they were in these celebrations, the mindset wasn't we're going to get drunk and then have fun. It's like no, that's not the way that they categorized it. We're going to have fun, and this is just a part of what we're doing. That's much different than the way we see it today, where it's like we get drunk, then we have fun. It's like, and that's the only way we can have fun as well. Whereas back then, they did things like dancing, they did things like music, they did things like playing games together. They're around a dinner table eating with each other, and they're like, okay, there may be alcohol on the table, but that's not what makes this fun.
Yes,
that's the difference between this.
It's like a side piece to the party where. Some parties are like alcohol, and the party doesn't get rocking until everyone's drinking.
Right.
So that's probably a good signifier. Like if there's a bottle and everyone's enjoying a drink, like that's chill. Like you're just chilling out. It's a social thing.
Right.
Like I think when you go from social to I'm trying to change my mindset, that's probably a good a sign of where you shouldn't be going.
I think that's a good boundary there. I think to think about.
So. Here's kind of because you talking about that. It's kind of raised a question in my mind. So on the one hand, maybe you have people that do go to a party to get drunk and all that. Like that's their purpose. So I guess my question is, what is the purpose of partying? Like what are we looking for when we attend a party?
I think that's the question, the $1 million question.
And that's where we can get into the good.
Yeah.
Right.
And we can mix up this last discussion with some of the bad and the good. You know, it's free thought here. I mean, it's a back and forth discussion, like we're having coffee. But going into the good stuff, I think in those principles of we live in a culture that does not have a sense of community. So let's say that first of all. And now, has there always? Well, let me say this before we transition. Even in Scripture, it talks about, especially some of these kings and people who are rich, throw extravagant parties and they get drunk. So let's not act like this didn't happen back then either. So that needs to be said. It's some people went off and now God calls them, especially in the book of Proverbs and stuff like that, fools and drunkards, and they're just after I think they're just after, they don't say partying, but they seek that nightlife, essentially is what they're saying. So we know what that means back then. We know what that means today. It's the same thing what we've been talking about. And so they still did it back then. But the thing is we don't do this as much as they did back then, is seeking that sense of community. That has been broken down, especially in Western culture right now. And you don't, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but you don't see things where people are intentionally getting together to eat around a table, to play games, to dance. I mean, I'm not talking about just, now, it's cool if a family does it, but we're talking like community-wide type things.
The Mexican culture does a really good job at that, though. I will say that the ones I've hung around with, they do make a point to bring all family and friends together just to eat and for games. Like they make a point to do that. But like you said, like I think Western culture, you could say, or just American culture, it's not as prevalent. It's almost like people like having their own private space, and they don't want to go out and talk with each other. Not everyone's like that, but I just wish more people would be willing to go out of their own way to make time to hang out with other people and talk, because then getting to what we were talking about before this, I think a lot of these differences that we have, where you have the left, the right, I think if more people talked to one another and got their perspective and talked with them and not at them, you could come to respect where they were coming from. You don't have to agree with them, but you could at least respect them as human beings and their opinion. And then you love them too. And if we had more love, and then we had more communication, and we talked with more people at these social gatherings, you're drinking a beer and you're talking to somebody who doesn't view the same opinions as you do. I think a lot of things would be different right now, as opposed to just yelling at each other on Facebook and Twitter and stuff.
There's a study that was done in a book called Bowling Alone, and it's a book. Anyone could go out there and read it. The major thing of the study is American culture, and how from the 50s it was normal for guys to go out every week to go bowling together, whether they knew them, invite new people to go as well, and that was a normal thing. Whereas in today, they've done research where instead of groups going bowling, bowling is predominantly funded by individuals going and bowling. So they do a study on how that happened. I mean, again, it's a whole book.
Yeah.
But that's what's happened in our culture, is where people got together and they did things together. And I think this enters into the whole partying thing. And now people are doing things individually. So now and I think I don't want to go too off into a individual versus community thing. But I only say this as that's what's happened inside of our culture, is we have too focused on the individual, and with my entertainment, with my social things that I do, the fun that I want tends to be, it's an individual thing rather than a community type of event. And just entering what you're saying with politics, for instance, since you don't have a community gathering where you have family, friends, church family, invited people, and their neighbors involved, this what it would have been way back when, then you're meeting new people, new ideas are there, but you also have your stability of your family and friends of your faith also being there. So again, it's a community thing that's going down there, and everyone's intermingling, having fun, getting to know each other. Whereas today it's like, it's video games by myself, it's social media by myself, it's watching TV by myself, it's Netflix by myself. And whereas you would have gotten all that in a community event that you would have looked forward to probably on the weekend or something that involved games and fun. And I think that's what everyone really seeks.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. I was listening to a podcast on the way up here, and this idea that is similar came up, and what they had mentioned is like right now we're in a crisis of meaning, and kind of the idea I think is that this going to parties and this desire to party is just it's like the fruit or the branch, whereas the root is this sense of we're seeking meaning, value, and purpose. And going back to being not in a community but more individualistic, I think that's where we find that is in a community setting, which is ultimately, and I'm not saying there's any, obviously correlation does not equal causation here, but we are seeing a lot of young people like our age and teenagers, leaving the church. And I think the problem is when you try to affirm meaning, value, and purpose with no grounding or no foundation, and this is what they were getting into, which of course the foundation would be God, right? So we would find our meaning being made in His image, our values would be grounded in His nature, and our purpose would be grounded in His commands. But when you remove that and you just make up whatever you want, like you can live like that for a while, but the problem is once the foundation crumbles, everything you built on top also goes down with it. And I think that's why you see us as being one of the most, I think, loneliest generations, depressed generations. I actually read a stat. They did a study, I think it was back in June, about how people, I think it was 18 to 24, 25% had seriously considered suicide within the last, I forget, I guess it was in the last 12 months or year, I forget, but...
And this country is the worst at it. I think we have the highest suicide rate because I think we've been so blessed with all this technology, and now this generation's playing video games way more than I did. We played video games. I've binged on video games, but I never sacrificed it. It was almost like we played video games for that sense of community because we would play, but I'd be talking to my friend down the road, and we'd all jump on. Yeah, it'd be like 8 of us,
Yeah.
Now it's like everyone's Lone Ranger, talking trash to each other, downing each other. I mean, we talk trash, but we were on a team, and we talked trash to the other team. But then at the end of the day, we ended up making friends with the people we trash talk with and playing with them.
Yeah.
But back to community, like, if we want to, talk about police officers, they're servants of the community, serve and protect the community. But what happens when there's no community? What happens when nobody's going out, nobody's getting together, hanging out? It's hard for the police force to learn and to learn their community and how they think, and vice versa. It's hard for them to learn how the police officers are thinking about what's going on in the community, and there's no conversations going on. And I think that's a big problem with what's going on with these police forces, and they're going overboard. Too much brutality. Their judgment's wrong. I guarantee if we had more conversations and people talked with each other on the community side and on the police force side, and we sat down, we had some good conversations, I guarantee we could learn something on both sides, and we wouldn't have as many of these terrible shootings and everything like that.
I certainly can't deny that the breakdown of community is at least a factor of what's going on in that situation. There's multiple factors.
Oh yeah, there's multiple. I'm just trying to think of a solution because I hear all these. I guess we're kind of diving off partying a little bit, so I want to maybe tie it back to that. But there are all these, boycotts, protests. We need solutions. So I'm trying to think of solutions that aren't, burning buildings down. Like, that's not solving anything. Solutions would be, we need honest conversations, but we need to figure out why some of these police officers are still working. Like, how was this guy, still having his job, and he was still and nobody did anything about it. The cops, George Floyd, they were just standing around him, looking at him. Like, why didn't they act? So there's got to be a way to be able to get them out, and I think it dives into police unions. These police unions in these large cities keep these cops around because they protect. That's what unions do. They protect their workers. So I think we need to look at that. And then it goes down to voting too, because a lot of times it's usually the mayors that are putting these police commissioners in. So I mean, I think there are, like you said, a lot of factors on that. But.
Yeah, there's multiple factors going on with that situation, and the more you have a break. I mean, I think what you're saying more goes back to where you don't have multiple people with different perspectives sitting down and talking with each other. Because you don't have community events to go and do that. And I've noticed, I've tried to get a little bit better for myself in person and on social media to sit down and talk with people with different perspectives, even within university, community college, different places that I've gone, different friends that I've met. And I try to talk with people with different perspectives. I try to. I'm not like some expert or something like that. But I try to get that perspective of let me hear the different voices and not let me just attack someone.
Yep.
And I notice the difference between people who hear different perspectives is you don't seem to be a person who attacks people. First of all, I notice that if you're not someone who listens to other perspectives, you immediately you get upset way quicker, and then you turn to name calling.
Yep.
That is a key factor, that you don't have a sense of community and you don't have a sense of listening to other people that are different than yourself. Again, I don't want to turn this into a different podcast here in a minute. But
I mean, we can
that-
do a partying / community gathering or / social issues. I mean,
if we want a 2-hour podcast.
yeah, that's a good point.
But it's a side note that's important enough to bring in the community aspect.
It is,
and that's what I brought in the whole community aspect in here just for a second, because it's important enough with this partying.
Yeah, because, in order for us to have a community, the one belief we have to share is that people are intrinsically valuable.
Yep.
And if you deny that, well, then you can just call them names, you can dismiss them, do whatever you want. Now, just for anybody listening, the problem is, why do we think human life has intrinsic value?
Yeah.
Right? What is your foundation? What's the grounding for that?
Yeah.
Of course, I think would be grounded in God. That'd be the only foundation.
What would somebody else say? What else could you even say that would they just tie into just morals, just general common morals, or
I think that would get into another topic. Usually what the common thing is that it's just
common
a brute
sense.
fact. It's just humans are the standard. The problem is, why think that on an atheistic worldview, I should say.
Yeah.
And I guess we say all of that as a grounding for some sense of solution to what's going on here, because I like to have fun. I'm just going to be honest here. Like, if anyone knows me, I like to have fun, and I like to even have stupid fun sometimes. And so I'm definitely not like some fun buster or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure people can even see at least an aspect of that on the podcast, at least, especially when Javen's around.
Yeah.
So, and obviously there's some dangers with that, so you just got to be on the line, make sure you don't go over. But I guess that's the thing with the whole alcohol and drugs involved. And I think what people really want also is they want a little stupid fun. Well, and if I'm honest, I like to have some stupid fun myself. But I've never been
good
drunk.
Getaway. It's a good getaway, man.
But I've never been drunk in my life, and I've had stupid fun. And I'm not saying that to say, oh, look at Kyle or anything like that, but I do stupid fun all the time, and I don't have to get drunk to do it. I think when you nail it down, you can still have stupid fun without the drugs and alcohol. I think you have to work on yourself, I think, with certain factors in yourself and becoming a more fun person. I think you have to have a certain amount of courage, I think, to be able to do and say certain things without going over the line without the drugs and the alcohol. Because you use the drugs and alcohol to lower your sense of, let's say, fear. Okay? Everyone's fearful, and you're using it to dull that down so that you can do things that you wouldn't do if you weren't fearful. Now, that comes with a consequence because you have no filter at all, and everything happens. But the question is, can you still have a filter but do things that are, let's say, I don't want to say borderline morally, but like borderline socially. Let's say that. I think that's a better word. And anytime you're going to have fun, usually you're going to say certain things or have fun, you're going to go up to the border, at least, let's say. And just enough to break breaking that ice, if you know what I mean. We even have games called icebreakers with the youth. Why is it? Because you're having enough fun to break the ice with everyone to then have a little bit of stupid fun. So I think you need to work on yourself as a person, I think, to be able to get that stupid fun. And that comes with your own character. That means probably being more confident in yourself more than likely, because some people when they're teenagers and young adults, the confidence isn't very high. You see what I mean?
Nervous all the time, just anxious all the time.
Right. And then nervous around if there's going to be women at these parties, more than likely nervous. So,
I had no game in high school. Y'all can mark that down. No game.
So it's possible that...
Or college, really. I didn't really have much game in college.
So you may need to work on your game with women, first of all, without the drugs and the alcohol. So that may be the root issue here.
All game is confidence in yourself. If you're confident in yourself and your foundation's God and you know where you're going, that's where atheism gets me, man. You know, it's I want that hope. You know, we have the faith in something after this, something better after this.
Yeah.
And that's you know, and that's just like at the bare like minimum. I want that hope. I want that, and I have that faith that I'm going to be with my grandpa. I'm going to be with my dad and anybody else who claimed faith in Jesus Christ and followed him. And with that comes confidence, because I'm not living like I'm not hold back. I know where I'm going. Like, you know, and I think people get scared, especially when they get older and older and older. People get scared when they don't know where they're going. And sometimes that can be used as a good thing, because sometimes it scares them into like, I need to, you know, get straightened up.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's what I would say on that. And confidence, like really, like, you know, talking to women, it's confidence. Talking to a boss, that's confidence.
Yep.
You know, a sales job, confidence. Whatever job you're doing, it's confidence in where you're going. And my confidence is in God, and I know that'll never falter.
Right.
Yeah, and think about some of these other things that we talked about, where community events, feasts, celebrations, we'll call them parties or whatever we want to call them necessarily. God even commands them in the Old Testament. So first of all, it's not questionable whether God wants you to do these things. Now, does it need to be done the way they're done in the Old Testament? I would say no. But at the same time, did God command them to do that for no reason? What was he seeking? What was in their hearts that they needed? And so we have things that are similar to that. I mean, like Easter, for instance. And even Sunday, in a way, is supposed to be a celebration of Jesus rising from the dead.
It's a community event.
Yeah. So we need to give ourselves a little bit of the pat on the back as Christians. We do it way more than the general population does, especially in the West. As a Christian, you do these things way more because of things like Easter and Christmas and every Sunday, which is weekly. So we got to give ourselves a little bit on the pat on the back on that one. Whereas in anyone else in the West, anything that was a part of our culture in the West, which anyone needs to know, the West is pretty much predominantly America and Europe, essentially. Let me say that if you don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, something that the reaction to this virus that happened, what happened to community events? Like, it just eliminated them for 2 months. We couldn't do anything, and I mean, we still see that now. I'm pretty sure there's multiple states that are still on lockdown, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm pretty sure New York and some areas in California definitely are way more strict.
We're not having the opportunity to commute with one another like we used to. There's people that aren't, you know, with pre-existing conditions that just can't. Like, I know a few people from our church that, you know, haven't been there because they just can't go. But even like going to restaurants, here it's not that bad, but in other areas, like, it's, you know, we're here, we're you know, minimum capacity or 50% capacity, I think restaurants are at right now. But I'm pretty sure there's other states out there like California, New York, some of the northern states as well, where they're not even allowed to go to restaurants right now. And there goes a part of community right there. Yeah. So, and I guarantee people got stir crazy too, sitting in their homes all day. You know, they got stir crazy. You know, and then all of a sudden, you know, George Floyd was killed and murdered, and I think it just fed into the anger too. People were just, you know, and they're angry about that because, you know, a lot of that's been going on for a long time. But then they've just been sitting in their room not being able to do nothing. A lot of them lost their jobs because of the reaction to this virus. And I just think, and the economy now, you know, it was booming. Now it's not because of the virus. So I think that plays a part of it as well with what's going on.
Yeah, and this just a quick point talking about that lack of community. Let me say this real quick.
Okay. Let's do some last comments. We're going to wrap things up. So go ahead, though.
Oh, what I was going to say, just that point of community, I think that ultimate sense of community that we're searching for is found in God. Like that's the whole point of Jesus coming to reunite us with Him. So I just want to make that point.
Yeah,
that's what we're searching for
Yeah.
through human means, but the ultimate satisfaction of it, I would say, is found in God.
Absolutely.
And that's something that, like, as the church diminishes, and I mean, you know, the church, I'm pretty sure the church has diminished before we've had revivals, we've had awakenings. But as it diminishes, that's something we used to all, you know, a majority of people would have in common was their faith in God. And as more and more people don't have that faith, that's a common strand that we lose. And I'll close with that.
Yeah, this last thing, you know, off what you said and what both of you guys have said is God has brought us a sense of community because of we're brought together in Christ and something that's a future hope. And so we always have that community of people. And off what you said as well is the more in our culture, which is the culture's foundation is Christian, whether someone likes that or not, or whether you accept that. And Western culture is based off of a Judean Christian faith. If you argue with me, why is there a statue of Moses in the Supreme Court? So I'll let you answer that question. So it's there, and the more we go away from that, a lot of these community events, a sense of community celebrations and feasts have been based off of a Christian faith. And as more as that goes away, there's nothing else that's really there. So the sense of there's a term called the sense of community. And the more that goes away, the more the sense of community goes away. And again, like you were saying, a lot of people seem very isolated. Now, does Kyle have all the answers to this? I certainly don't, because of the way the culture is going. And if we're honest, we know that even the culture affects us more or less. We got to be honest about that. But as a Christian, though, and anyone else wants to hear that, is there are certain things that you can do as a Christian in these areas to have that sense of community. And some of that is working on your own character when you go to some of these things, and maybe doing new things that you were kind of alluding to a little bit, Parker. And as Christians, maybe we need to do some more things that are more community-based. Do we do some of them? Yes. Is it enough? Probably not. And maybe some of us need to use that creativity, being created in the image of God. You know, God is a creator, and we're creating the image of God. Maybe we need to create some new things to get people together. And maybe the things we already do, make them more fun. Maybe be okay with stupid fun. Maybe I've known that my time in the church, some people look down upon that as you're being stupid or whatever. And it's just dumb or even like borderline wrong. It's like we don't need to be too black and white about just having fun. So that's another thing. Now, more or less on where you are, you know, that's not a black and white thing with every church, but that should be emphasized. That should be okay, especially with the younger group that are leaving. Let's not have them go off to college and binge drink to find that fun. Let's let them find that in church. Let's find that in community. The things we're already doing, maybe new things as well. And yeah, that's the last things that I can think of. So, you know, again, we could keep going on and on with this discussion.
Oh, yeah.
But thank you for joining in again with us for this podcast with Zach, having him back, and our new co-host Parker here today. It's good to have him. And just thank you for joining in on this conversation. I'm glad we had it. I've never had anything quite like this conversation. So
It's a good one.
yeah, and if you guys got anything out of this, or there's something that we missed or something, put that in the comments, because I would certainly like to read it. And if you like this podcast, you know, just hit us a like. It just reminds us that you're getting something out of this, and that it shoots it off to people who are also getting something out of it. So thank you again. We're only here because of you, and we'll see you on the next one.